In this video, we'll be focusing on how the file system item source can be used in Astera Centerprise to process multiple files through a transformation and loading process. The file system items source object can be utilized in both dataflows and workflows to accomplish tasks. First, we will have a look at how it can be used in a dataflow. Here we have a dataflow that we want to run on multiple source files that contains customer data from a fictitious organization. Using this dataflow, we want to sort the data, filter out records of customers from Germany, and write the filtered records into a database table. Let's begin by changing the source object into a transformation object by right-clicking on the source object's header and selecting transformation in the context menu. You can see that the color of the source object has changed from green to purple, which indicates that the source object has been changed into a transformation object. Notice that the source object now has two nodes, input and output. The input node has an input mapping port named filePath, which means that it can take the path to the source file from another object. Next, drag and drop the file system items source object onto the designer. If you look at the file system items source object, you can see that the layout is pre-populated with fields such as file name, extension, full path, directory, and other attributes of the files. To configure the properties of the file system items source object, right-click on the object's header and go to Properties. Now provide the path to the directory or folder where source files reside. If the specified source location contains multiple files in different formats, you can use this option to filter and read files in the specified format. If you want to process files present in the subdirectories, you can check the Include Items in Subdirectories option. If you want to include all items in the specified directory, you can check the Include Entries for Directories option. After specifying the path and other options, click OK. Now right-click on the file system items source object's header and select Preview Output. You can see that the file system items source object has filtered out delimited files from the specified location and has returned the metadata in the output. You can see the file name, extension, full path, directory, and other attributes, such as whether the file is read-only, file size, last accessed, and other details in the output. Now, map the full path field from the file system items source object to the full path field under the input node in the customer data transformation object. Once mapped, when we run the dataflow, the file system items source will pass the path to the source files one by one to the customer data transformation object. The customer data transformation object will read the data from the source file and pass it to the subsequent transformation object to be processed further in the dataflow. In a workflow, the file system items source object can be used to provide input paths to a subsequent task, such as a run dataflow task. Let's see how this works. We want to design a workflow to orchestrate the process of extracting customer data stored in delimited files, sorting that data, filtering out records of customers from Germany, and loading the filtered records in a database table. We have already designed a dataflow for the process and have called this dataflow in our workflow using the run dataflow task object. Notice the filePath input node in this object. This is present due to a variable for filePath in the dataflow. This can be used to receive the filePath. We have multiple source files that we want to process in this dataflow. So we will use a file system items source object to provide the path to our source files to the run dataflow task. For this, go to the Sources section in the toolbox and drag and drop the file system item source onto the designer. Note that there is this small blue icon with the letter S. This indicates that the object is set to run in singleton mode. By default, all objects in a workflow are set to execute in singleton mode. However, since we have multiple files to process in the dataflow, we will set the file system item source object to run in a loop. For this, right-click on the file system items source and click Loop in the context menu. The object now has this purple icon over the header which denotes the loop function. Let's map it to the run dataflow task. The run dataflow object is connected via a double arrow with the file system items source object, which signifies the looping function. To configure the properties of the file system items source, right-click on the file system item source object's header and go to Properties. This opens the file system items source properties window. The first thing you need to do is point the path to the directory or folder where your source files reside. Once you have specified the path and other options, click OK. Now right-click on the file system items source object's header and click Preview Output. You can see that the file system items source object has filtered out delimited files from the specified location and has returned the metadata in the output. You can see the file name as well as other attributes for these files. Now let's start mapping. Map the full path field from the file system item source object to the file path variable in the Run Dataflow task. Once mapped, upon running the workflow, the file system items source object will pass the path to the source files, one by one, to the Run Dataflow task, which will then process them in the Dataflow. When the file system item source is set to run in a loop, the Dataflow will run for n number of times, where n is the number of files passed by the file system items source to the Run Dataflow task. For instance, you can see that we have 6 source files in the specified folder. The Run Dataflow task object will pass these 6 files one by one to the Run Dataflow task to be processed in the Dataflow. So this is how you can use the file system items source object in Dataflows and workflows. For more information on Centerprise, please visit our documentation site. Thank you.